The following content is for informational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Aliyah, its affiliates, or any organizations represented by the participants. Nothing discussed should be construed as financial, legal, or investment advice.
Welcome to Market Cap, where we feature firms and funds to explore the thinking that guides them, the patterns they observe, and other forces moving the markets. I'm your host, Stefano, Director of Institutional Services at Aliyah, and with me I have Greg Schvey, Chief Operational Officer at Yuma. Yuma powers projects within the Bittensor ecosystem. Their mission is to create positive economic and societal change by connecting transformative ideas to decentralized intelligence, helping promising teams access capital, technical resources, and community support to build on decentralized AI. Greg, welcome on the show. So great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this one. Usually we start this off by doing some personal exploration, getting to know the person. Please tell us, what were you doing before being Chief Operational Officer at Yuma?
Sure. I've been in the fintech space broadly for probably the last 15 or 16 years. I'd originally started my career on Wall Street as a fixed income analyst at one of the big banks. Left that to get into the pursuit of crypto full time in 2012 or so. Started my first company with my brother Jeff in 2013, which was the first order management system, portfolio management system, and index products for what was started as Bitcoin, and then it evolved into lots of other cryptos. We sold that in 2020 to Digital Currency Group, which is actually the parent company of Yuma. So I have been working very closely with the Digital Currency Group team for quite a while. And then after I had that company, we started another company that built traditional financial market infrastructure. And we were particularly focused on what was called the post-trade space. So we organized data after a trade was done, how that would get processed through the various different market infrastructure companies, banks, and large buy sides, things like that. So we ended up selling that business to the London Stock Exchange Group about a little over a year ago. And so they purchased all of our derivatives, post-trade processing infrastructure and clients and technology and all that sort of stuff. And that's sort of the gist. And now I'm here.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So it's very clear. Background as a founder, which I imagine should have prepared you pretty well for your current position. How did that experience shape your thinking? How was it to be a founder? And how does that inform your operations on a day-to-day basis for what you're doing at Yuma?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things that was very profound for us over the last 3 or 4 years, and this is probably true for a lot of people, but we got to really see it firsthand as creators of massive scale infrastructure. We built some of the most high value software that exists in terms of the amount of notional value that was riding on it. We're talking quite literally trillions upon trillions of dollars that was going into this. And we had about 130 people on the team, the majority of which were engineers. And what we saw over the last few years was that the ability to develop software became easier and easier and easier. And the entire paradigm um, for creating infrastructure of real scale has changed so dramatically, right? And it became very clear what AI was going to do to not just the software development industry, but many, many other things. And so, as we saw that transition happening, it became increasingly obvious that it was going to be necessary to really understand what was going on and invest our energy into helping to be part of that future.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Maybe a timely tangent here is the Citrini report that came out, I believe, Monday, anyway, a few days ago. Um, did you have a chance to look at it? What are your general thoughts on it?
Yes, I did. I mean, I think that it was definitely an interesting thought piece. I wouldn't necessarily assume that it is going to all come true. One of the things that it really seemed, in my opinion, to overlook is the general adaptability of humans, and the ability for humans to continually find ways to provide value. So even if the things that they used to use their labor on become easier, or the cost of those things goes to zero, and you don't need humans for them, humans will find other things to do. Right. There was in the I guess it's probably the 40s or so, when elevators became automatic. There were strikes from the elevator operators unions, and there's all these pictures of them, and people were actually afraid to go into elevators that were operated automatically with the push of a button, instead of
Mm,
their person they saw every day that would move the lever and make sure the door was open and not closing on them. And eventually you look back and you realize that's a little nonsensical from a modern lens. But at the time,
yeah,
I'm sure it was extremely disruptive to a lot of people. And there's photographs and news articles to that point. And the same is true, right? I mean, we have bulldozers instead of people knocking things with chisels, right? I mean, it's the natural way that things go. And candidly, I'd put myself in that same camp, right? We were running a large software company. We saw that there was going to be a change in the way software was developed, and we adapted. I think people will continue to adapt and find ways to be productive.
absolutely. How long have you been um, running the ship at Yuma right now, and how did that start off? How's that time been so far?
I've been here since October, so maybe a little over 4 months. And I think actually is an interesting kind of way that it worked out is I hadn't actually heard of Bittensor until the Digital Currency Group Summit that they throw every year. And so about almost 2 years ago now, they had put on a bunch of content at that conference about Bittensor, and it was right as we were negotiating the sale of the other business. So I got some initial exposure to it, and we had some downtime in between the last company as we were transitioning over all of the infrastructure and the data and the contracts and everything. We just started actually mining on Bittensor, which I'm sure we'll get into what that actually means in a moment. But we things were kind of slowing down. We were no longer trying to grow a business, and so we just went headfirst into it. Started writing code and producing value on the network. And then I ended up in conversations with Barry, the founder of Digital Currency Group, just by happenstance, and it was a natural fit. We'd known each other for a long time, and we both very enthusiastic about this network.
Wonderful. All right, yes, let's get a little bit more into Bittensor, Yuma, because the mandate is pretty wide. Um, you're an incubator. You're also an investor. You help the ecosystem by mining as well. Um, please walk us a little bit through everything that you guys do and everything going on in the Bittensor ecosystem.
Certainly, might be helpful just to for any of your listeners that are not already aware. Just I'll give a very brief overview of what Bittensor does, and that'll help contextualize what we do in the space. And basically, in short, Bittensor is an open global marketplace for digital intelligence. And what that actually means is that anybody can post a defined compute related objective. And that could be anything from improving AI models, creating synthetic DNA for drug testing, providing compute hardware, just about anything related to AI infrastructure. And then people all over the world will come in and compete to provide those services or that infrastructure. And the Bittensor network basically just acts as a coordination and payments layer that connects all these people who have never met each other to produce these intelligence assets. And so our role in that space is we really just try to make it as we've identified gaps where we can either facilitate the growth of the network or make it easier for people to access. And so that comes in a few different forms. So one is we act as a validator on the network. And what that effectively means is that we act as a third party arbiter for um, between the parties that are posting these tasks that they want done and the people from all over the world that are contributing those outputs. And we'll look at the outputs and assess if they meet the objective and then help align and determine the appropriate payouts there. We do that for about 125 different companies on the network right now. We have an accelerator program where we help young companies that are accessing the Bittensor network to get set up on the network, to uh, help with their outreach and their communications and their marketing, as well as some initial capital to get them started. And then we also we do have we have a small mining operation largely for testing at this point, which has been very interesting. And then we also recently launched our asset management business, and this is probably the most broadly applicable. Is what we have right now is two funds, and what you can do is for a single check, we give you access to the entire universe of projects that are happening on the network, and you get financial exposure without having to worry about interactions with the network, custody, reporting, all those kind of things. We do that all for you. So I'm sure we'll dive into each of those a bit more, but that's the general gist of what we do.
Very interesting. So the latter functionally for factually functions as a sort of index fund.
In short, yes. So maybe to
Yeah.
go one level deeper in terms of how Bittensor works is for every company that posts a task on the network, it goes into what's called a subnet, and subnets are basically defined areas of the network where these tasks get posted, and they act as a specified coordination area for just this one specific task. So, for example, in the most simplistic version, and there are some of these on the network that say, um, we're looking to access GPU, right? And there could be people from all over the world that have GPU that could be used for people that want to do various AI tasks somewhere else. So a company will come in and say, if you have GPU, you can plug it into the network, and effectively what will happen is you'll get paid by the network, and then the company gives people access to your GPUs. They act as sort of an intermediary to facilitate that, right? And so you have subnets that are doing uh, provision of compute hardware. You have subnets that are doing training of specific models for everything from weather forecasting to financial forecasting. You have folks that are doing scientific discovery, all kinds of different things that are happening on the network. And so to answer your question, what our funds do is they give people access to all of these different projects, each of which have their own protocol native token, which can, obviously be very cumbersome given that there's more than 100 of these things now. And so what our funds do is they give people the ability to invest in ways that they're familiar. Again, just you can send a wire. It's a very traditional type of fund, and you get financial exposure to what may well be the most diverse set of AI projects happening anywhere.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. All right, a question there to follow up. How we usually try to understand the parties that we talk with is to understand their business, right? Their business model, I should say. With you guys, it seems it's pretty expansive, but you already touched on some points. Can you explain a little bit more how Yuma generates returns?
Certainly. So I'll go business line by business line, and that's probably the easiest way
Right.
to think about it. So when
Yeah.
we're acting as a validator on these different subnets, that's a defined role that exists within the network for each one of the subnets. And by acting as a third party arbiter between the parties who post the task and the people who are contributing the inputs, what we do is we provide objectivity in the assessment of who's supposed to be paid. And what's very special about the Bittensor network is that if you wanted to do something that would be highly technical, like say, for example, train a specialized AI model. What you would normally have to do is you would have to go out and hire a team of engineers. You would have to manage them. You would have to coordinate them and build all these processes between them. You have to deal with all of their personal matters as they come up and their vacation schedules and all those kind of things. What happens on BitTensor is there are just people from all over the world that you've never met that are competing to do the best training on that model. They're competing to provide the best possible outputs that meet your objectives, right? And so let's say, for example, and this is a real example of a subnet on the network is one that does weather forecasting, right? And so what they'll do is
Mhm.
they'll look and say, okay, we're going to consolidate people from all over the world who have developed models for weather forecasting, and they will consolidate those. And then that company sells an API on the other side. Now, the people that are consuming that API to understand, if they're going to host a concert or a sporting event or whatever else it might be, they don't know that in the background that the infrastructure is actually people from all over the world that have built out these specialized models. right? And so what's great about the way Bittensor works is because those people that are competing from all over the world only get paid if they're doing the best job. It means that you have this ultra competitive environment, so that you have the speed of development and improvement is far beyond, in many cases, what you would get if you had to set all of this up on your own as a company that has to manage all of these people as a single unit, right? Does that make sense? Pause there for a sec
It
before I
does.
get into explain. Yeah, and so
It
what we
does.
do at Yuma as a validator is we act as an arbiter to make sure that to basically assess the inputs that are being done and determine which ones best meet the objective that was set by the party that posted the task, and that helps determine the payouts and to make sure that that's done fairly and appropriately. So that's one of the business lines, and so what happens there is we do get compensated for that based on a variety of metrics that happen on the network, but basically we get some income through that. We also have um, management fees for the funds, very very straightforward. So it's a 3% management fee for based on the assets under management, and then we have our accelerator program, and it works vaguely similar to a VC. It's a little different because there's some nuances in the way that the asset class works and the way that the network works, but that's the general gist there.
That's clear. All right. Are there any risks that you guys need to manage?
Yes, there's
A
always going
lot.
to be risks. Yeah, I think that I would actually argue that in this space, one of this is a new asset class, and these are a lot of which are new companies that are executing on these different projects. And
Mm,
one of the bigger risks there is volatility in this space, and so one of the ways that we manage that and we've designed products around is through diversification, right? And so one of the reasons we launched our fund is we enable people to get broad diversification to the space without being um, overly concentrated in one individual project, right? And so it's a very typical answer in terms of financial risk management, but would be generally very difficult to do without a fund like this.
interesting. What what are some constraints or frictions that you need to operate under that that frustrate you the most? That that you wish weren't there, but you simply have to deal with.
Frustrations. I mean, I'm very fortunate that we have a fantastic team. So, I will say, on places where many people might see frustrations in their business, I fortunately don't have very, very, very little of. But I think, one of them is if you think about everything that we've talked about here, there is a layer of complexity or sophistication that's required to understand what's happening. Right. I mean,
Mhm.
it's you have to understand artificial intelligence. You have to understand how that applies to a wide range of applications all over the world. There's a crypto component to this, of course, as well. And this is a crypto network at its core. And so the way that those all interplay can be sometimes complicated to explain to people. We try to do our very best to help distill that down for people, to provide products and services that make that easier for people. So the things that are complicated for us, we try to make easy for other people. Is really the entire time. Whether that's investment products, whether that's finding ways to facilitate access to the network for some of these young companies. But it is innately just a sophisticated, highly technical product. Um, but fortunately, there's folks like us that are out here trying to help with that.
It is. It's definitely inherently like you're already talking about two uh sectors, right? Two industries that are quite advanced, sophisticated, and complicated. And you're sitting right on the intersection of that as well. So that just has to multiply all the complexity going on there. With everything that you see going on, right? Like you shared the operations that you guys engage in, whether that's validation, running the funds, the accelerator. You're sitting in a very specific spot that gives you a lot of exposure to, I would say, data. Um, you probably see a lot of early stage projects. Some of them you might accelerate, others you might just invest in, others you simply know from being exposed to the ecosystem. What are some insights or patterns that you see that you think not everyone might have and that not everyone might appreciate?
I'm actually very glad you asked that, because one of the things that I've seen in my career in crypto and being very exposed to this for a long time is crypto has gotten very good at moving money around. You can do that very frictionlessly, and there's lots of financialization that has happened in a very open arena, which I think is great. A lot of times, though, it's been harder to understand how that creates genuine economic value. And in Bittensor, we see every day we see genuine economic value being generated on this network in a way that I just haven't seen it in really any other version of crypto. And really, in many cases, uh, I would put this in competition with any other platform to develop genuine, tangible benefits to the world. So I can give you some examples if it would be helpful, just maybe
Please
make it a
do.
little more tangible. Yeah. So I'll start with some of the more just sort of, um, I guess you'd call it like scientifically interesting things that are happening. And then I'll go into some of the more commercial and revenue sort of oriented ones. So one is just recently there's a subnet Numinous. That's actually a Yuma portfolio company. So they actually were able to beat Gemini, the Google AI. They were able to beat it on one of the benchmarks for predictions. It's a predictions based subnet, and they're actually outperforming some of the largest AI providers in the world. And I think what you find is that a lot of people think that to be able to compete in AI, you would need massive data centers and hundreds of billions of dollars of capex and that sort of thing. In some cases, that's true for generalized intelligence, but there is a lot of room for specialized companies to come in and do what they do extraordinarily well. And we've seen that, like I just mentioned, with folks like Numinous. You've got a company called Macrocosmos that is actually doing distributed training AI training runs. So they've linked together thousands of people that can use their laptops to basically do distributed versions of what you would see at some of these larger data centers. You've got a company called Ridges that is doing basically AI for software development. They've continued to outcompete on some of the major coding benchmarks. They're supposed to have their first product launch sometime in the next few weeks. And so, you see them outcompeting some of these multi-billion or sometimes hundreds of billions or trillions of dollar companies, right? And you see that actually all happening in these environments where you're getting inputs from people you've never even met, which is pretty wild. But it also translates though into commercial benefits that are worth noting. Um, there's a company called Score that is doing basically uh, real time vision AI, so they can assess what's happening in videos and provide real time context to people that might benefit from that. So they're signing all kinds of commercial partnerships. They're working with football clubs in the UK to analyze their sporting events and do analysis post game. They're working with gas stations over there, and what they're doing is looking in real time, and they can tell you if one of your pumps is malfunctioning and people are going up to it and it's not working properly. They're working with agricultural producers to to understand the quality of what's coming out of their farms, right? And so these types of things, and they're signing real deals on these. Zeus, the weather prediction one I mentioned before, we saw that they just signed with WeatherXM, where they have a commercial partnership there. And again, this stuff is going now out into places like WeatherXM, and people have no idea that in the background there's this crypto network that's coordinating tons of people from all over the world. Right? I could keep going on and on a bunch of these, but I think you get the general gist. And what I
Yeah.
would leave you on this question is just that this is also turning into real revenue. So these mostly very young companies are actually executing commercial contracts. They're generating real revenue, and it's taking economic value from outside the network and bringing it back into the network, driving the incentives for the parties that are contributing these AI inputs. And we're actually seeing the early stages of just a classic virtuous cycle where the inputs create more value, the value comes back into the network, and the incentives improves and keeps going.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want to see, right? That's the virtuous loop. Um, that's great. I want to go back to something we discussed or touched on briefly at the beginning, the Citrini report. We don't have to talk about that further, but it does bring up a a commonly held view about AI, right? That you already shared that you don't agree with that. What are some other commonly held views, in this about AI, or maybe about Bittensor as a network specifically, that you think are commonly held, but that you don't agree with, or that you think are at least incomplete? Um, yeah.
Well, I definitely have a long list of non-consensus views, so I'm happy to share a couple of them.
Please.
Yeah, I think one of the ones that I always find interesting is, and this has been talked a lot about lately in just general trading conversations and on Twitter and or X, that sort of thing. But you've seen a very very high correlation between crypto markets and software indexes, right? And so you may
Mm,
have seen the IGV ETF is a general software ETF, and its correlation with Bitcoin and crypto has been extremely tight for the past few years. And so, in a historical context, that makes sense from a macro sense, and it justifies that they can be correlated because these are both markets that benefit from low rates, right? Software companies tend to be higher growth. Higher growth companies benefit from lower discount rates because revenue in the future, earnings in the future can have more value relative to if you had higher rates and higher discount rates, right? Similarly, Bitcoin and crypto benefit from lower rates because it's viewed as a store of value with limited supply that benefits if people are trying to protect their wealth from inflationary policies, like low rates where money is cheap, right? So it makes sense historically that those would have been trading together. What I find very interesting is that there has been a a major sell-off recently in a lot of the software stocks, right? And that's been driven by the AI story. A lot of software as it existed even just a few years ago is at room it has room to get displaced here. And we're seeing lots of different
mm,
examples of that, with IBM dropping 10% just a few days ago. And you look across the board and you see that a lot of these software companies are down 20, 30, 40%, even just over the last 6 to 12 months. What is interesting to me is that the correlation to crypto has maintained in that period. But it actually, if you're looking at what's driving the downturn of AI displacing these software companies, it actually doesn't make sense that the crypto would be following that correlation down. And what I mean by that is, you know, I actually think that the crypto is positioned to benefit tremendously from AI. If you think about what AI agents are going to use for payments, it seems very obvious, at least to me, that it's going to be digitally native money that you can transact with openly and programmatically, right? And it's completely conceivable to me that there would be more AI agents than humans on the planet in a very short amount of time. And their preferred version of money is most likely going to be some version of crypto, whether it's native crypto, stable coins, something. It seems like people are still trading a very lazy correlation between software and crypto that has brought the price of crypto down, while the one of the most profound demand generators that could ever happen, maybe generational demand generators, is right at the beginning. So you have price going down while the demand is going up. Seems like I would actually argue, you couldn't ask for a much clearer investment thesis or a better entry point if you were trying to enter this space, right? And I would actually even say that goes further if you were applying that to crypto that was focused specifically on facilitating AI, right? And so, yeah, and again,
yeah.
this is exactly why we have the funds that we do, to try to make that as accessible for people as we can. But it feels like the consensus view on that, at least what the market is saying, is totally off base here. And is not paying attention to the real story.
I find that immensely refreshing in a time where you're having conversations at, with friends or at conferences, friends from the industry, I should say. And everything seems in a slump, right? As far as price action goes, but also a lot of people like their sentiment, not just on the timeline or on the charts, but also in actual conversations is pretty negative. Um, when you actually look at how things are positioned right now, as you said, on this specific front, that's very interesting. Of the thesis about AI accelerating immensely and almost needing blockchain to facilitate the payments there. Uh, but even if you go wider, right, on the regulatory front, things are going in the right direction. Uh, traditional players, traditional finance players, are adopting blockchain technologies, etc. It's actually it's the outlook is not bleak, I should say.
No, not at all. And it's one of those things that you just have to look past the charts and you'll realize how much is actually going on. And it's impossible to spend time in this space and not see. And I mean, I've walked through, I don't know, a dozen examples just 5 minutes ago of some of
Yeah,
the very real things that are coming out of this. And it's crazy to me that, I'm trying to help other people understand what's actually happening because it just seems so incredibly obvious. So hopefully things like this will help. But I do trust that people will get there because markets can lag, but they generally tend to find their way to the truth over enough time.
definitely. Talking about markets and lagging and finding truth, what are some events that has happened in the market or during your time in this industry that have impacted your decision making as a business leader? Maybe not at Yuma because it's been 4 months, so maybe that's not enough time, or maybe it is. Um, but yeah, events or developments, trends that were taking shape or taking place and that made you think, hey, wait a minute, we have to go differently about this specific business strategy or this initiative that we're rolling out, anything of that nature.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've seen over time is that the Bittensor network has evolved quite a bit. And so we're actually just 1 year since the launch of the subnet tokens, where each subnet has their own protocol native token, which means we've gone from basically one asset on the network to now 129 assets on the network, right? And that makes things it's very elegant from an actual execution perspective for each of the individual subnets, and it very logical why that would exist. But it's grown very quickly in how much there is to track and manage in this space. And so, we, like everybody else, has had to keep up with that. And what's driving that is really just the massive growth in the utility of the network itself. But that also means that it's more to invest in, more to track. This is actually that's one of the major reasons that we launched the asset management arm that has these funds, is because if you want to have access to this, it's no longer a single asset. If you want exposure to the network, you need an easier way to access that. So that was a pretty dramatic change, but it also led to a very quick response from our team at Yuma to address that. Um, Another one is, a lot of these assets are relatively low liquidity, and that can create some very unique pricing dynamics where the price can move dramatically one direction or another very rapidly. And so what we're actually just today, we are launching an index to track the subnet market that acts as a reliable benchmark to understand what is the overall growth or progress of the subnet market. And it takes into account some of the intricacies of this space. And we see that over time, one, just as a general reference for people to understand what is the actual market what was the actual market doing on a given day. Is it overall more or less value than we saw yesterday? But then also, over time, if you look at any other mature market, you need reliable reference rates and indexes to do things like benchmarking, right? If you're running a fund that might be trading in the space, you would need a mark for your books, right? If you're running a fund, you understand like what am I actually marking different assets at? If you want to have any sort of derivative products, you would need these types of indexes and reference rates. So we just wanted to get something out there as just a free service to the industry, so that they could start to look at it and say, this is what we're seeing. And so our first index is the Yuma Composite Index. It is effectively a market cap weighted with some other parameters on it, but in short, a market cap weighted index to track the totality of prices of these various different tokens on the network. And it uses the same general framework as our composite fund. So it is, it does track very similarly to the overall market itself.
Excellent. It's I keep being amazed at the expansiveness of all the things that you guys are involved with in the network, right? It's very wide. Um, what are
Well,
other
I would,
things that?
w- w-
Please go ahead.
yeah, one thing I would note, it does sound like a lot, but they all feed into each other, right? None of them are completely independent, because they're all really designed to accelerate the growth of the network and make it more accessible, right? So, for example, we run these validator
Right.
services, right? But that also means that we can be a good technical counterparty for the parties that we're helping in our accelerator program, right? We're in there running actual technology infrastructure that these subnets that we're accelerating are depending on. We can give them real feedback. We can tell them what would be better. We can, we work together on these things as it's happening. Now that obviously helps our subnet portfolio, because they get a great partner to actually facilitate a critical role in any one of these subnets that they can rely on. There's somebody they can pick up the phone and they can talk to about these things.
Hmm.
Because we're doing both of those, it makes our asset management products more investable, right? It gives access to, we've signed more than a dozen deals, I think, with various different custodians around the world. So we have validator relationships with folks like BitGo and Copper and Crypto.com and folks like that. So if they're custodying Tau for their customers, they can stake it with us, and we'll do validation that drives returns for their customers, right? And so by being a partner in this ecosystem, all of these things actually play into each other, and they actually
Yeah,
are sort of self-reinforcing. So they seem different, but they're actually all just part of a singular puzzle, if that makes sense.
it definitely does. There's a lot of natural synergies and a common thread running through all of them, right? That's excellent. What are some other things mm, on the horizon, or I should say future events or developments in the market, right? Or in the industry? Could even be on a macro level that you guys are looking out for, whether those are trigger events that signal to you that you have to shift course, or that maybe invalidate your thesis on some front. What are things that you are, um, yeah, keeping an eye out for?
We are always keeping a very close eye on regulatory developments. We spend a lot of
Mm,
energy on just making sure that everything we're doing is regulatory compliant. It's such an evolving space that many times the regulations aren't written in a way that you have to try to understand and reach out to the regulators and talk to them. But we keep a very close eye on um, any sort of developments that are happening there. I don't currently foresee anything that would change our business, but that could also shift very quickly. We currently have an administration that has been extremely rational and cooperative with this industry. That could shift if there's a change in a few years to a new administration. Um, the Bittensor protocol is evolving very rapidly, so we pay a close attention to that. Everything we do is in a response to a real need in the market. So if the protocol changes, we'll continue to evolve with it. That may mean evolving our business lines, like some of the things that we discussed earlier. Um, I think those are probably the main ones that we think about. But actually, I would add to that, AI is moving very quickly as well. So everything from the way that models are built, delivered, used by end users, that all changes almost, it seems like on a day-to-day basis at this point. There's the speed of which things are moving. So we have to keep a very close eye on that. And that's going to help inform us as to where there could be very real value in the space. And we would obviously direct our energy accordingly.
All right, absolutely. So that's clear. Those are things you're looking out for that might inform the decisions that are yet to be made. Talking about decisions that are maybe already made, initiatives on the horizon, announcements that might be interesting to share with people. Um, what's in the pipeline right now? What is the next big focus for you, or anything you would want to share with the audience that's coming up?
Well, for those that aren't as familiar with Bittensor, there was a pretty big change in the way that I'd say we're in the middle of a change in the way the network is operating, in the sense that we're actually spending a lot of time collaborating with the industry on network governance at the moment. The network's founder just announced that he wants to encourage continued decentralization of the way that the network is run. So we're working with lots of other leading companies to basically try to we're hiring protocol developers so we can contribute to the actual technical developments of the core protocol. We're also starting to talk a lot more about governance frameworks, those sorts of things, to make sure that this is a sustainable network in a decentralized way as it continues to grow. And so, that's definitely been a big one. Um, our subnet portfolio continues to just put up all kinds of interesting wins. We've seen a bunch of major commercial developments that have happened recently. I can walk you through some quick examples, but we have one company, Red Team, that's been fantastic. They do basically security, AI for security. They've been doing more and more commercial contracts. We've got Yanez, which is actually, it's a pretty cool. They actually, what they use their subnet for is they have the miners actually create fake IDs, which sounds crazy at first. But what they are is they're actually a security company that licenses their software to banks for fraud detection. And so what they compensate the miners for is, can you beat our fraud detection systems with fake IDs? Right? Right. And so they're basically white hatting their way into this very competitive way. So, it's the kind of thing that if you were good at doing that sort of thing, it gives you a productive, commercially viable outlet for that skill in a way that actually improves security, doesn't harm it. Right. So there's lots and lots of, and they're signing deals with large financial institutions all the time to go implement this software. And again, presumably a lot of them don't even know that in the background there's this distributed infrastructure all over the world of experts from, could be a kid at MIT, could be a guy in his basement in Romania, but they're actually all contributing to security of our financial system. Right. And so
Yeah.
we see this kind of stuff coming down the pipe. And, if you asked me again in a week, I'd have another set of advancements that we'd be able to talk about.
Maybe we should have you back next week in that case. But
Yeah.
jokes aside, it's very clear that there's a lot going on with BitTensor in the ecosystem right now, and with Yuma as well. More than people probably know. So if people do want to know more, where can it best go? I would say, like, one, to learn more about the ecosystem, about BitTensor, but also if they want to learn more about Yuma and maybe contact you guys specifically.
Yeah, I would. One is, you can always check out yumaai.com. That's our website. We are releasing our next State of Bittensor report, which goes through lots of examples of the types of things that are going on in the network. There's tons of analytics and charts and information about some of the latest developments from the protocol, the trading, pretty much anything that you would want is all contained in there. It's a fantastic resource. I would definitely recommend that. You can follow us on X. So it's at Yuma Group, YUMA Group is the handle. People are welcome to follow me personally. It's at G Schvey, GSCHVEY. I post all kinds of data and analytics on Bittensor. Probably start there.
That's more than enough resources, probably, especially with the report coming out as well. That should keep people busy for a little while if they want to know more. Um, all right, lots going on. Um, More than I knew specifically, so it was very insightful and instructive for me personally as well. Um, it's fascinating the intersection that you guys are operating on and all the use cases that unlocks, right? Especially since they're so they're already finding product market fit, as you say. And all of this is going on while a lot of the market is paying attention to elsewhere anyway. So it definitely deserves a lot more attention. Greg, thank you for coming on to the show. Like I said, it's very instructive, very insightful. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you did as well.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Right. To our audience, we hope you enjoyed it as well. This was Market Cap, where we feature firms and funds to explore the thinking that guides them, the patterns they observe, and other forces moving in markets. See you on the next Market Cap.